Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're tackling something I think a lot of us have dealt with or are maybe even dealing with right now. How to keep things exciting in a long-distance relationship.
That's a good one.
We found this podcast episode, and the title really caught our eye. Surprise and Delight. Impressive ways to wow your partner in a long-distance relationship.
Yeah,
They had some seriously creative ideas in there. I was like, man, why didn't I think of that?
right. It's like you think you've heard it all, and then bam.
Totally. So we thought we'd share some of the highlights with you guys.
Perfect.
One thing that really stood out was how they went beyond just, the typical send flowers advice.
Yeah,
They really dug into the psychology behind why certain gestures work so well.
exactly. It's not just about the action itself. It's about the message it sends, the emotions it evokes.
Yeah. Like, for example, they talked about personalized gifts. We all know care packages are a classic, right?
Yeah.
But they talked about adding a handwritten letter.
Oh, that's a good one.
In this day and age of instant messages and emojis, there's something so powerful about getting a letter.
It's true. It's like you said, it's that tangible physical reminder that someone's thinking of you. It's not just a quick thinking of you text.
And it shows effort. You really sat down and put the thought into it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it creates a sense of closeness that, a text just can't replicate.
And one couple they interviewed actually called their care package a hug in a box.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's like sending a piece of yourself across the distance.
Isn't that so sweet?
It is. And it's so true. It's like a physical embodiment of your love and care.
Okay, but they didn't just stop at care packages. They also talked about subscription boxes.
Oh, yeah. But not just any subscription boxes, right?
Right. Like not just some random thing. It has to be something that's really tailored to your partner's interests.
Exactly. It's about demonstrating that you really know them. Like you pay attention to what they like, what they're passionate about.
Yeah, it shows you're putting thought into it, not just like, oh, here's a random box of stuff.
It's so much more meaningful when it's personalized like that.
Mm.
And there's also that element of surprise, right? Every month, they get a little something special that reminds them of you.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's like a little monthly reminder of your love
Ah,
and that you're thinking of them, which can be especially important in long-distance relationships, right?
definitely. But they didn't stop at just gifts either. They also talked about how to create experiences together even when you're miles apart.
Ooh, that's interesting. How do you do that?
Well, they had some really cool examples like signing up for an online cooking class
Oh,
together
that's fun.
or taking a virtual tour of a museum you've both always wanted to visit. Like, imagine exploring the Louvre together from your own living rooms.
Wow, yeah.
It's about finding those shared experiences that can help bridge the distance.
That's so cool. I love that.
And they actually interviewed a relationship coach who specializes in digital intimacy.
Beautiful intimacy. Interesting.
Yeah. And they said that engaging in activities together like that, even virtually, can actually help build intimacy and fun in a relationship.
That makes sense.
It combats that feeling of isolation that can sometimes creep in when you're apart.
Yeah, because you're actively creating shared memories. You're laughing together. You're experiencing new things together.
It's like you're saying, hey, even though we're apart, we're still in this together.
It's a really powerful message.
It is. And honestly, it's a great reminder for any relationship, even if you're not long distance.
Oh, really?
Like sometimes we get so caught up in our daily routines that we forget to make time for those shared experiences.
It's so important. But you know what surprised me the most? In this whole podcast episode, they actually put a lot of emphasis on handwritten letters.
Seriously.
Yeah.
I know, right? Like, you'd think in this digital age, those would be a thing of the past.
You would. But they made some really compelling points about the psychology behind it.
Like what?
Well, they said when you take the time to sit down and write a letter, you're really pouring your thoughts and feelings onto paper.
Okay, yeah.
And the person receiving that letter can really feel that effort, that intentionality.
It's like a tangible expression of your love,
It is. It creates a lasting emotional impact that a text message just can't match.
And the podcast episode even went a step further and suggested writing a series of love letters.
Oh, wow.
Like little time capsules to be opened on specific dates, maybe when your partner is feeling down or you're missing them extra.
That's so thoughtful. It's like a little dose of love and encouragement right when they need it most.
Exactly. It builds anticipation and offers support at just the right moment. And speaking of support, they also had this adorable idea for everyday gestures.
Oh, tell me.
A message jar filled with notes and affirmations for your partner to pull from each day.
Oh, that's so cute. I love that.
So even on those days when you can't talk as much or you're both busy, they still have a little something to remind them that you're thinking of them. That's so sweet. And it goes back to that idea of consistency, right?
Yes.
It's those little everyday gestures that can make a big difference in a long-distance relationship.
Exactly. It's about weaving those little moments of connection into the fabric of your relationship.
It's not just about the grand gestures. It's about those little things that show you care day in and day out.
And the episode actually shared a story from a couple who said that reading each other's letters brought back those butterflies they felt at the beginning of their relationship.
Ah, I love that. It's like a little time machine back to those early days of falling in love.
Right. It speaks to the power of nostalgia and tangible reminders of love.
It really does. Okay, but let's talk about the big one. Surprise visits.
Yes. Now we're talking.
Obviously, this depends on distance and everyone's schedules, but when it's possible,
It's a game changer.
it really is. And the podcast had some great tips for making the most of it. First, involving other people, friends, family adds to the surprise.
Like a whole welcome committee. Exactly. It shows just how much effort you're putting in.
It's like turning the whole thing into this fun conspiracy.
Right. And then there's the reveal itself.
Ooh, the possibilities. Showing up at their work unexpectedly, or maybe popping up on a video call disguised as someone else.
That's so good.
The element of surprise is key.
It is. But one thing a travel expert they interviewed cautioned against is not being mindful of your partner's schedule and preferences, even with something as exciting as a surprise visit.
Oh, yeah, that's a really good point. Like, even with the surprise, you don't want to accidentally disrupt their life and make them uncomfortable.
Right, exactly. It's about finding that balance between spontaneity and thoughtfulness.
So we've covered gifts, experiences, even the grand gesture of a surprise visit. But what about those everyday interactions, like virtual date nights?
Those can get a little repetitive over time, can't they?
Exactly. They can start to feel a little routine. But the podcast had some awesome ideas for making them more special. Like, remember those themed date nights we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
Well, they took it to the next level.
Oh, how so?
Like, imagine this. Your date night starts, the doorbell rings, and a gourmet meal you secretly ordered arrives at your partner's door.
Whoa. That's genius.
Right, it creates that shared experience even though you're miles apart.
And it's such a wow factor. They'd be so surprised.
Exactly. And they even had a couple who goes all out with themed date nights and costumes.
Oh, that's so fun. I love that.
Right. It's about injecting that element of fun and playfulness into your relationship, no matter the distance.
Exactly. It's about making the effort to keep things fresh and exciting.
Well, I think we've covered a ton of ground already, but there's so much more to unpack.
I know, right?
We'll be right back with even more insights from this episode, so stay tuned.
Okay, great. Welcome back, everyone. As we're going through all these ideas, I keep thinking about how important it is to really know your partner.
Yeah, like what really makes them tick?
Exactly. The podcast actually talked about love languages.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
Like, some people feel most loved when they receive gifts.
Right, so for them, that subscription box we were talking about earlier would be perfect.
Exactly. But for others, it's quality time that matters most.
So in that case, maybe it's those shared virtual experiences that we talked about, like taking a class together or something.
Yeah. And they actually had this really cute anecdote about a couple who surprised their partner by doing a chore they hate.
Ah, that's nice.
Like, not some romantic gesture or anything, just something practical that they knew would really make your partner's day.
That's so sweet. It shows you're paying attention to those little things that make a difference.
Exactly. It's those small acts of service that can speak volumes, especially when it's something they really appreciate.
And I think it all comes back to being thoughtful and really understanding your partner's needs.
Totally. And speaking of thoughtfulness, the episode shared so many stories about how these surprises really impacted people emotionally. Like, one person talked about how they were feeling super homesick, and then this care package arrived from their partner.
Oh.
And it was like this wave of love and support just washed over them.
Yeah, it's those little reminders that you're not alone, even when you're physically apart.
And it doesn't have to be a big, elaborate thing either.
Right.
It's about those consistent, everyday gestures that show you care.
Right. Like maybe instead of just texting good morning, you leave a voice message.
Ooh, I like that.
Or you share a song that reminded you of them. It's those little touches that can make a big difference.
Yeah, it's about being present in the relationship, even when you can't be physically present.
I love that. And one of the couples they interviewed said they started this shared online journal where they write each other little notes and updates throughout the day.
Oh, that's a cute idea. That's like a modern day version of passing notes in class, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
But with a lot more depth and intimacy.
Yeah. It's a really sweet way to stay connected and share those little moments that make up your lives.
Yeah.
And, speaking of staying connected, they had a whole section on keeping those virtual date nights from becoming, stale.
Yeah. Yeah. It's easy for those to start feeling a little routine after a while.
It is,
Ugh.
especially when you're doing them week after week.
But they had some really fun suggestions for how to spice things up. Like, remember those themed date nights we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
Well, they suggested taking it a step further. Like, what if you both ordered takeout from your favorite restaurant?
Ooh, that's good.
And then you had a virtual dinner date.
I love that. It's like you're actually sharing a meal together, even though you're miles apart.
Right. And they even talked about setting the mood with candles, music, maybe even dressing up a little.
It's all about creating that ambiance, that sense of occasion.
Exactly. It's like you're transforming your living room into this romantic date night destination, even if it's just for a couple of hours.
It's a way to remind each other why you fell in love in the first place.
I agree. And beyond just themed date nights, they also talked about finding other ways to have shared experiences.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Well, they had a whole list of ideas, like watching a movie or TV show together online.
Oh, yeah, we do that sometimes.
Right. Or playing online games together.
Hmm.
Or even taking a virtual tour of a museum or art gallery.
Ooh, I love that idea. I can just imagine exploring a museum together, even if we're on opposite sides of the world.
It's like you're creating those shared memories that are so important in any relationship, but especially in a long distance one.
Yeah, and it gives you something new to talk about, something to connect over.
Exactly. And there are so many amazing online resources available now. You can practically go anywhere in the world virtually.
It's incredible. But, speaking of special things, what about those big occasions, those milestones that can be tough when you're long distance?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm glad you brought that up. The podcast actually had a whole segment on celebrating those special moments, whether it's a birthday, an anniversary, or just a random Tuesday that you want to make memorable.
Because let's be honest, it's easy to let those things slide when you're not physically together.
It is. But it's so important to make the effort. It shows your partner that they're still a priority in your life, even when you're apart.
So what do they suggest?
Well, they had some really creative ideas. Like, of course, they talked about handwritten letters and cards.
Oh, yeah.
Because in the digital age, getting something tangible in the mail is just so special.
It really is. It's like a little piece of your loved one arriving in your mailbox.
Exactly. But they also suggested things like planning virtual celebrations with friends and family,
Oh, fun.
sending thoughtful gifts, or even creating a personalized video montage with messages from everyone who loves them.
Oh, that's so sweet. It's like a virtual hug from all their favorite people.
Exactly. And it shows that you're going above and beyond to make their special day memorable, even from afar.
It's all about that effort, isn't it?
It really is. And it brings us back to that central theme of thoughtfulness and intentionality.
It's about finding ways to show your partner that you're thinking of them, you care about them, and you're committed to making the relationship work no matter the distance.
And it's about keeping that spark alive, even when you're miles apart.
Absolutely. We've covered so much today, from
Right.
practical tips to heartwarming stories, and I feel like we've barely scratched the surface.
I know, right? But before we dive into the final part of this episode, let's take a moment to just kind of reflect on what we've learned so far.
That's a good idea.
What are some of the key takeaways that have really resonated with you? Welcome back to the show, everyone. So we've talked about a lot of really great ideas for surprising your long-distance love.
Yeah. We've covered everything from those big, grand gestures to those small, everyday things you can do to make your partner feel special.
And one thing that's really stuck with me is how those surprises can be like little love notes sprinkled throughout the relationship.
It's like you're speaking a language that goes beyond words,
Mm.
a language of thoughtfulness and care.
Yeah, and those little gestures become these tangible reminders that you're thinking of each other, even when you can't be together physically.
And it brings us to a point that the podcast made that I think is so important. It's not just about the surprise itself. It's about how it makes your partner feel.
Right, like what's the emotion you're trying to evoke?
Exactly. Are you trying to make them laugh, feel loved and appreciated, excited?
Because it's that emotional impact that really matters at the end of the day.
100%.
One of the relationship experts they interviewed actually used this analogy of making emotional deposits in the relationship bank.
Oh, I like that.
Each thoughtful surprise is like a deposit that adds to that sense of security and connection.
It's like you're building up this reserve of love and trust that can help you weather those storms that inevitably come up in any relationship, but especially in a long-distance one.
Totally. And you know what? I think this idea applies even if you're not in a long-distance relationship.
I agree.
It's a good reminder to be intentional about showing our loved ones how much we care.
Because at the end of the day, it's those small, consistent gestures of love that really add up.
So, as we wrap up our deep dive here, let's shift our focus from what to surprise with to how we want our partner to feel.
That's a good challenge.
Like, imagine you're planning a surprise for your partner.
Okay.
Instead of getting caught up in all the logistics, take a minute to visualize their reaction.
Yeah.
What's the emotion you want to see on their face?
That's a really good point.
Joy, excitement, comfort, gratitude.
Let that feeling guide your choices.
Exactly. Like, if you want to make them feel cherished and appreciated, maybe it's that heartfelt handwritten letter we were talking about.
Right.
Or if you want to inject some fun and excitement into the relationship, maybe it's that surprise delivery during your virtual date night.
It's about finding that thing that will really speak to their heart.
And ultimately, it's those feelings of being loved, understood, and prioritized that will help your relationship thrive, regardless of the distance.
Well said.
So that's it for our deep dive into surprising your long-distance love. We hope you've enjoyed this episode and learned some new tips and tricks for keeping that spark alive, no matter how many miles separate you.
We had a lot of fun talking about all these creative ideas, and we hope they've inspired you to start planning your own surprise masterpiece.
And remember, it's not about being perfect or following a formula. It's about putting your heart into it and showing your partner how much you care. Until next time.